The idea for the Babadook wasn't really a conscious thing that, a light bulb went off and I went, oh, what about this idea? It started more with a feeling and a kernel of an idea, and then just grew as time went on. But I guess the short that I made called Monster was the springboard for that. And then, I started to dream about what else was in this story. And then it all grew from that. Well, I knew from previous experience how important a producer is, integral, not just for the financing of a film, but for the creative protection of a film. So for this one, because it's a little unusual in its concept, I really wanted someone who was an equal and who was very creatively focused, and someone who could spend time wanting to understand my ideas and then wanting to protect them. And I love Christina, and she was a friend of a friend, and so, she was someone that I knew socially, and she's just been amazing. She really has protected this film. It's been able to stay pure from the get-go because of her. Well, the themes of the Babadook that interested me, I'm very fascinated by what happens to people when they don't face things, when they push down on difficulties in themselves, and where does that go? So, if someone's had a tragic experience and they don't deal with it, how does it sit in their life? And I guess the Babadook is an exploration of that idea, told in a very heightened way. So in the case of the Babadook, Amelia presses down on these terrible feelings so much that they develop an energy and become something that splits off from her, becomes separate from her, and then starts to control her. And what that thing is, who knows? I know. I feel what it is, but it's up to the audience to interpret what that is. Whether it's supernatural or whether it's psychological is really up to the viewer. But that's the basic idea for me. That's the kernel of the film. The character of Amelia is a complex one, and I always wanted her to have heart. And, people's initial reading of the script, they were concerned that she was going to be cold and unfeeling and unsympathetic. And I always felt when I was writing her that she was someone I cared so much about. And so I wanted an actress that was really based here and that had the capacity to give the character warmth. And Essie, for me, has been a perfect casting because I've known her for a long time. I went through NIDA with Es, and we're very good friends. But on top of that, she's just a brilliant, brilliant actress, and so courageous, so committed, intelligent, but really heart. She uses her heart when she acts. So yeah, I couldn't be happier with her performance. Yeah, she's a knockout. When I'd written the film and then we started auditioning 6-year-olds, I was thinking, oh my God, what have I done? Because to put a 6-year-old in the lead role in a film is a really stupid or insane thing to do, but the story demanded it. So, and we looked at children that were older, so we looked at 8 or 9, but Samuel needs a real innocence, and he is a character as well that needs to be loved by the audience. And we found that with 8 and 9-year-olds, there was a sort of a knowing quality that starts to creep in to kids around that age. So he really needed to be an actor of 6. And we found Noah pretty quickly. Once I spotted him, I thought, oh, there's something about him that is really special. And he is 6, and he's an innocent 6. He has a quality that is really pure as a person, and that translated so beautifully into the character of Sam. And I said to someone early on in the shoot, it's directing a 6-year-old's like trying to get Mercury to form in a straight line. It's like every day was terrifying, but it's really paid off. And I think the fact that I am an actor and I know how hard it is, and I basically, you know, went through scenes with him and acted them first for him, and then he was able to get it through that process. And he's very smart. He's very emotionally advanced, you know, much more than most children of 6. He had a great empathy for Sam, and a very big heart as well. So all of these qualities just added up to what I feel, I mean, we haven't edited it, but what I feel is a really terrific performance. I'd sort of written and been an actor since I was a kid, not in any sort of professional way, but I always knew I wanted to be an actor. And then I went through NIDA, and by the time I got out, I didn't want to act anymore. I do love the process of acting, but I don't really have the temperament for it. And I very quickly got bored with it, actually. So giving that away was very easy for me. I'm quite introverted as well at times, so it was hard for me to always push myself forward. I wasn't comfortable with it. And I'd always written and directed as a kid. And then when I came to acting, I thought you had to do one or the other. It's very different now, but when I went through NIDA, it was you do one thing or you do the other thing. So I pushed that aside, but when I gave up acting, the most natural thing was to go back. At the time, I thought I don't want to go to film school because I don't like educational systems. I wanted to learn on the job, so you know, I approached the Danish director Lars and went and worked, you know, as an attachment on Dogville, which for me was the best film school, best education. And you know, I saw someone who I think is quite genius in the day-to-day process of making a film, and that for me was. It just gave me the courage to say, okay, I think I can do this. It's not going to be easy, but I can do it. So that was how the transition from acting to directing really happened. And after that film, I just worked away at my scripts. And one thing that's been integral to the development of this film is a place called Being a Film Lab in Amsterdam, which is an extraordinary script writer and director sort of script development lab, and I spent 5 months there developing this script from a treatment to a second draft. And they are an extraordinary bunch of people because they really wanted to find out what your vision was first, and then they helped you to develop the film and got on board script advisors that were suited to the vision that you had. So that for me was just phenomenal. And that's what I think has given this film a strong base. Well, I wanted someone whose work was very handmade and who didn't, you know, who wasn't sort of attached to Photoshop and who wasn't going to create everything on the computer, but who actually would draw these beautiful images. And I'd seen Alex's work, and I was using it as a reference when we were looking at potential illustrators. And, you know, we had a few test Babadooks done and it wasn't quite working. And I said to Christina, well, why don't we just ask Alex himself if he wants to do this? And we did, and he was like, yeah, I want to come over. And so we spent, in early pre-production, we spent time developing that first before any of the production design or any of the cinematography came on board. We spent time with him working through that, because for me, the Babadook book is the core of the world of the film. So we had to get that right first. Yeah, so that's how Alex came on board. I wanted to create a world that was unique unto itself, so that it existed and had its own set of rules, but it wasn't realism or naturalism. And so I was very inspired by, you know, early silent horror films and things that have just a slightly heightened world to them. So, you know, Alex Holmes, a production designer, and Radek Wojcik, the DOP, have been really integral in creating that world, and they've done an amazing job, because it had to be the place where this entity could spring up, and it wouldn't be stupid, or it would just make sense, that because the world was not real, it was a surreal world. So the tone is probably connected to that world, and I don't know if I could put a word to it. Strange, sometimes funny, sometimes horrific. Both Alex Holmes and Radek have really, we've had a small budget, but their commitment and their work has elevated that and made the film look much more expensive than it actually is. We've been very dedicated, working on weekends and to get this world happening, making it believable. I must say that Alex Holmes is the genius of this film, and I'm so grateful to him for his beautiful work and his sensitivity and intelligence and extraordinary commitment. And often I think, it's often the cinematography that gets the focus, but here this film just could not have existed, in a real space. And the sets that he's built, designed, and every member of his team has been extraordinary and has gone above and beyond just because they care about the work. So yeah, I'm very happy. I think the hardest thing about this film was we had a very particular world, so it wasn't social realism where you could just get a camera and go into a found space and film it. It needed a lot of preparation, a lot of effort, and we had a very small window of time to make it. And we had a child, in almost every scene, so we needed more time than we had. And I think the biggest lesson for me has been to trust that somehow the film will get made, and it did. And I think too, to learn to trust the people that you've brought on board and know that they're there. You're a team, you're part of a team. So it's been the biggest thing. I think in terms of directing actors, the biggest lesson I've learnt on this is, directing children. I really thought that I was going to have to trick Noah maybe, or get him to do certain things in order to get these emotions out of such a young child. But in actual fact, the best thing I did was to tell him the story from start to finish. I took him to the zoo and I said, now Noah, this is what happens. And I left out all the horrific bits, but I basically, I told him what the story was about. And I said at the end, so basically, no, it's about the power of love. And he went, oh, the power of love. And so ever since then, and I said, and Sam's the real hero of this film, and he saves his mum. So whenever things got difficult, and they did a couple of times with Noah, I kind of reminded him of that. But I think what I learnt was not to look down on children, child performers. If you give them, you just have to tell them what's going on, and they can understand it from their perspective. And so if we went into emotional scenes with him, I'd just tell him exactly what's happening, and he was actually able to get there, So that was a big lesson for me as a director. I thought I knew actors, but yeah, it was a big lesson to work with a child so young. How much they could actually offer. It's extraordinary. I hope that the audiences will make up their own mind about what this Babadook thing is, and that I hope that the deeper reasons I wrote this script will reach the audience, so that it's not just a film that will scare them, but that it's a film that will move them in other ways. That's my hope. But I hope people see it. That's always good too.